Hey everybody, I'm Tom Vasel and I'm here with another plea to board game publishers. This is a follow-up to my last video, and I want to start out by saying my last video, a plea to publishers, is by far the most important video because I talk about the rules of a board game. And everything I talk about today I think is important, although maybe a little bit more subjective. I think the stuff I mentioned in the last video is pretty objective, and again, I think a great rule book covers a myriad of problems, so that is the more important video. But I want to talk about everything else in a board game and things I think that publishers can do to improve our quality of life. I get so many different games in, and so many of these problems pop up time and time again. So let's start with the box of the game. So first of all, the box. The size and the shape of the box matters, right? I don't want a game that's too big, where the box is so big everything rattles around in it. But I also don't want one that's too small. I don't want to have to play Jenga to figure out how to get everything back in, or Tetris. Jenga is the wrong word there. Also, boxes shouldn't be in odd shape. We have standardized size boxes out there, and there's a lot of good size boxes out there, but making your game a very long game that has a hard time fitting on the shelf, or putting it in a weird tin or a hexagonal box or whatever it might be, that sounds cool and you'll be like, woo, people will be impressed, until they have to put it on their shelves. Store owners are not happy with you when you make weird size boxes. The box should be a reasonable size, and the box is a useful thing. If I'm going to buy a game, I want that game to look good, but I want to understand about the game on the box. You need to put pertinent information on the box. Your box should have the name on it, and it should have the name on the sides. I'm always kind of mind-boggled when some boxes don't have the name of the game on the side of the box because they're putting other information there. But your game might be on the store shelf or at my house on my shelf, and my eyes just roll over it. I'm not going to play that game because I forgot it existed. Put the name of your game on the different sides of the box and also on the front of the box, and other information. Designers should be credited on the box. Artists should be credited on the box. And I want to know the time of the game, the players of how many players the game is for, information on the box, and on the back of the box, I want to see a picture of the game. I want to understand about that game and see what that game is. All this information is there. That when I go to the store, the box is the only thing I have to judge your game by. You want it to be the best you can possibly be. Also, when you put this information on a box, it needs to be truthful. If your game is a 3 to 5 player game, but there's a weird variant and 2 people can play it that way, that's fine, but I might put that information on the box, because it's very disappointing if I buy a game that I think is for 2 players, for me and my wife, and we get it, and it's like, well, it's 2 players, but you're using a dummy player, and it's a very different game. Okay, I would have been good information to have known on the box. Or if you say it's a 30-minute game, but inside you're like, well, that's the basic scenario here. It's actually 2 hours. Again, you need to be truthful in this information on the box. All right, let's talk about the board of your game. Most games have boards. Do you have score tracks in your game? Score tracks are important. So make them reasonable. So many games have zigzagging score tracks, which are very confusing. Put numbers on the score track so you know where to go on the score track. The pieces that are on the score track should fit on that score track. It's really frustrating when the pieces are bigger than that. This is a very simple thing, and yet so many times I see it missed. Or even that the pieces can stack on top of each other. That's a really cool piece. But what if 2 people are on the same spot? How are we supposed to stack them? You have a rounded cube, and I put them on top and they fall off. And again, this can come across when you hear, you're like, oh, what are you whining about? But you can fix this problem before it starts. Again, we're talking about improving the quality of life. A score track, which is a very important part of a game, should be easy to move things on. Your board as a whole should have pertinent information on it. If there's a spot there that has a cost for something, then why would that not be printed on the board? If there's some important information about a track, or maybe there's a card that gets discarded at the end of a round, why not put something there to notify me of that? I don't know that the board, I know you don't want your boards to be ugly and cluttered with all kinds of stuff, but the more information you can put on the board, so that I don't have to keep referring to the rule book to see what things are, is really handy. If certain things have costs, put those costs there, and I can just grab them. The less I have to go to the rule book, the happier of a gamer I am. And then the board itself should be clear and easy to read. Look, I know you paid someone a good amount of money to draw that board. It's a beautiful board. But sometimes you got to fade those pictures because functionality is more important than form. I need to be able to see things on the board, and so many boards these days are too cluttered or too busy, and you're trying to figure out how things go, and I need to be able to see that information. Fade that picture a bit and use legible fonts. Remember, in most games, somebody's upside down, and they're going to be able to need to read what's on that board from different directions. So a board should be as easy to read as possible. Again, lots of people playing games. We have glasses. We have a hard time seeing. We might be upside down or sideways or whatever it might be. So you want to make our job as easy as possible. And when stuff is on the board, is it covering up important information? So that needs to be something you consider too. So let's talk about eyesight a bit. Eyesight's important with games. So, and this could be a whole video, but I'm just mentioning it here. You need to consider folks who might be colorblind. This is such an easy thing to do now. There are apps and websites and things where you can go and compare colors and see what colors work for colorblind people. And also, there are symbols and things you can put on cards and pieces of your games to help colorblind people. Now look, I know it's not perfect in every way, and there are some games that are about color, which in that case, there's just nothing you can do in that situation. But for the vast majority of games, this is something that can be done. However, a lot of people are considering colorblind folks these days, but you also need to consider people who can't see very well. Throughout your game, everywhere in your game, is the text legible? Is it easy to read? I want to be able to see it, and we need to consider low light. You might say, well, this red and orange, colorblind people can easily differentiate between them. But what about normal people? If you have a red and an orange or a blue and a purple, and in a low light setting, they look like exactly the same color, that's a problem. And on that note, my player pieces should be very easy to differentiate no matter what they are from other people's playing pieces, not just for playing the game, but for putting things away. You also need to figure out when you look at your pieces, can they be confused? Give them to somebody and say, quickly, sort these pieces out. And if there's two pieces that people keep getting mixed up, well, then they look too similar. Your pieces need to have some very different things, whether it's material or color or shape. And also, there's a pretty much humongous amount of colors in the world. Use them. There should never be a component in the game that is the same color as a player's piece. And you can say, well, they'll just get used to it. You're the red player. Yes, the bricks are red. But you need to make those bricks a different shade that it's very clear that that is not my color. It aids in teaching the game. It aids in confusion. It helps when sorting the game out. There is many, many colors in the world. Use them. All right, let's talk about functionality here. Can people pick up the pieces? I shouldn't need tweezers to get your pieces. The pieces themselves, will they roll across the board? Have you thought about that? Are they going to slide around when you put something here and you slide it? Is the slightest jostling of a board going to move things? Nowadays, many boards are dual layered where there's spots to put pieces. I know that's an expensive thing to do, although there are ways around it to print things out and fold them. But it is so helpful. It is a game can be just unfathomably frustrating when a slightest jostle moves everything around the board. And you need to think, how do these pieces go? Do these cards slide under the board? Am I supposed to slide a card under something? Will that work? The functionality of a game can be very frustrating for people who might have a hard time moving things around. Unless it's a dexterity game, I don't want to be playing a dexterity game. Like I said earlier, when you put things out, are they covering up that important information on the board? And then, again, this could be a whole video, symbology on the boards versus text. You need to sit and consider that. I understand you want your game to be sold in 82 different countries, so you're trying to be as language independent as possible. But if I don't understand what the card does, it's not useful in any of those countries. So you have to come to some determination, and your symbology should make sense. I understand that many people want to make theirs different than other ones. Oh, I want mine to be different than every other company, but it needs to make sense. If I look at a symbol and I don't know what that symbol means, or the symbols are confusing on cards and everything, that causes for a very bad experience. And comes back to what I mentioned in my last video, you should definitely have a player aid that explains what all the symbols do. Okay, also let's talk about cards. Now, lots of games have boards. Almost every game has cards in it. The quality of cards. Now, this could be, again, a big debate discussion. How good do you want the quality of your cards? But there needs to be some quality of cards. Cards are going to get beat up in every game. And it's very frustrating when cards are coming apart and peeling apart. You need to consider the quality of cards and put the best possible quality that you can afford into a game. But we also need to talk about, again, I keep coming back to this, ease of reading. I shouldn't have to really look at a card to figure out what that means on the card. And that comes in the thing with the size of cards. Small cards, sometimes they're necessary because you're placing cards on the board and such. But if not, larger cards, they're easier to handle, they're easier to work with in every regard. The borders of cards are important. You put a black border on cards, it's going to get nicked up and it's going to be very hard to look at that card and you're like, oh, it's all beat up. You need to think about how a card looks and, again, utilizing the area on a card. I've seen cards with a huge picture, a bunch of flavor text, and at the very bottom, some small text on what the card does. And I'm thinking I would have made some of that bigger. And cards need to be clearly marked. Man, when I get the rule book out, it says these are these cards. You know what? There's nothing wrong with putting the name of a deck of cards on the back of them. But if you must have the card just with different backs, then that's fine. Have different backs. Nothing is more frustrating than having a whole bunch of cards with the same back and some more cards with the same back that are something completely different. Why? You don't pay, you can pay somebody to make a different back for that one card. It could be a very minor thing, but it's just really frustrating when cards get mixed together and you didn't realize, oh, these weren't supposed to be in it. You have cards for a solo game. Differentiate them on the cards clearly so I know to remove them. Storing a game. That's a big deal. I already mentioned that your box should neither be too big nor too small, but does the game itself fit back in the box? And how are you intending it to go back in the box? Are you intending it to be bagged? Well, you know what? Then give us bags. Are you intending it to go back into an insert, a nice insert you made? Well, then make sure that that insert fits in the box and it's beautifully, and there's information on what goes where on that. Is there something that needs to be put together? Tell us how it gets put together and make sure that once it's put together, it gets stored back in the box. If there are pieces to be thrown away, let us know that clearly. If there are pieces to be kept, tell us that right away. Some games say, well, the sprues that you punch the cardboard counters out, you need to put them underneath the insert to bring it to the top. Well, then that better be in bold at the beginning of the rule book so we don't accidentally throw those away. And I would argue you should design the insert better so that you don't have that problem. Insert designing is a whole nother issue, but think, how do you want us to put the game back? Those are my thoughts that I had. I have some other minor things. If a game could use a scoring pad, put it in. Give us a great scoring pad that makes it very easy to add up scores at the end of the game. Have enough pieces in a game. So many games I'm reading, they're like, well, you can just borrow pennies or something. But don't put us in that situation if possible. Give us enough pieces to play. The general quality of a game, you want it to be as good as it possibly can be. I know that there's a cost, thing that comes into play, and there comes a point where something, it doesn't need to be that nice. But if not sure, the nicer a game is, the more I have a chance to play it. Consider the size of the game on the table. Set your whole game up. Does it fit in an ordinary dining table? If not, can stuff be made smaller, but again, still functional? It's a tough thing, but it's an important thing to play because games that take up too much space don't get played nearly as often. And the box for the game should be enough. And if not, it should be stated on the box. If you need something else, let me know. Do I need pencils? Tell me. Do I need an app? That's fine, but let me know on the box. Nothing is more frustrating than bringing a game, opening it up, and you say, well, we can't play it because we need counters that weren't included in this game. So there you go, folks. Those are just things I think that publishers can do to improve the quality of life. Like I said, our first video about the rules, I think, is hands down important. But a lot of this other stuff is just, it feels like when you play it, sometimes I think, man, this score track's terrible. Did no one play test this? Did no one mention the score track works? You have to think about every aspect of the game and think about all the people who are playing your game. People who have a harder time reading. What kind of setting is the game going to be played in low light or not? For colorblind people. You have to think in many situations and giving the components to people who have never seen your game before and letting them just say, oh, this piece rolls across the board. I don't like that. And listening to that will make your games better. Well, there you go, folks. I want to see games be the best they can possibly be. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Tom Vasel. This has been another Plea to Publishers from the Dice Tower.